Hello everyone, welcome back to another Strategoi video. It's been a minute. I've mentioned this in some other videos, but in a couple months ago, started working at my new job as a data steward for some research divisions and of a University of Applied Sciences, and I just have not had a ton of time to be recording these videos. Fortunately, Jonas has picked back up and has made two recent Lumineth additions to our Lumineth catalog, which has been nice with Siegfried as a guest. But this also means that the large amount of tournaments that Nick and I have been playing, we have not been covering. So the last one that we actually had coverage for on the channel was the first Threshold Invitational, and the second one's coming up soon. But since then, we had this tournament that we're covering here today, which we'll talk more about, of course. And then there was the Alliance Open Team Championships. And then there was, we had a teams tournament in Bruges where Jonas was supposed to be on our team, but he got sick. Then Nick and I played a doubles tournament here in the Netherlands. And then we played a tournament recently in Mechelen, which is near Antwerp. It's just been a wild and crazy tournament season going on. So we're way behind. My excuses to all the TOs out there and anyone else that was really excited to hear about their part in the tournament. But I promise I'm going to try to catch up on these sooner than later. I will give a disclaimer, though, because it's been a while. This took place late August. 2 months ago. Nick and I, our memories are probably a little bit faded on how this tournament actually was, so my apologies to the TOs. But anyway, Nick's with us here. Nick, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, ready to talk about it. It's about time,
Yeah.
damn it.
Nick, were there any tournaments in the middle there that I know you weren't at AOTC because you were on vacation, but was there anything else that you were a part of that I've missed, that I forgot about?
No, that was it. You got them all.
Okay, and then coming up, we'll talk about that in the last slide, but we've got some tournaments to talk about coming up as well. So, Nick, this was your second time at an event here. This was Neil and Tice and a few other people, their tournament series, the White Scars group, down in Alblaserdam, or in general, the Rotterdam area. This is the second tournament of theirs you've been to, but the first that was a singles. Is that correct? Because we played doubles and won that event back in when was that? Like in May or something.
Yes, I think the first time we were going to go there, I got sick. But then, yeah, so this would be the first singles one.
Okay, yeah. So let's go on to the next slide here, and as always, we're going to cover the tournament in general, some army lists from both of our armies, our matchups, and then concluding thoughts. When we're looking at a tournament review on our channel, we often start with a rules pack, then cover the meta, and then the experience kind of at large. Now, as far as the rules pack is concerned, and just the event itself, we had 36 players, which is a little less than the last time I went to one of the one-dayers, but was still a good number of people. Normal 3 games, 3 hours each, 3 rounds minimum. I don't even know. I keep leaving that in the slides. I should probably get rid of that because a lot of tournaments don't even specify that. You really should be trying to shoot for all 5 turns. Now, Nick, I can't think back to whether I played all 5 turns out at this tournament, but certainly, especially with the kind of addition to the community of the tabletop, what's the name of it? Tabletop Battles or whatever, that app, which is the one that has the really nice visual output that's kind of a grid. That kind of came out around this time. My first game that I recorded in the app was actually for this tournament, which is not only a great way to keep track of what you did, but who you played against and all those kinds of things. I lost my track of thought there, but it has to, I think, I got it. 3 rounds minimum. So for me, the app kind of keeps you honest with trying to finish all 5 turns, I feel. Like, it feels kind of weird not to fill out the whole thing. You're, like, incentivized to fill out the whole thing, because otherwise you don't get a great visual at the end if you don't have the right information. So I feel like since the app came out, I've been pretty much always at least talking through, well, I can think of one recent exception, but talking through all 5 turns of a game. Do you feel like that's kind of been the same for you? Has the app changed anything for you in the meantime, or were you always kind of doing that Give me kind of like a feel for where you sit on that spectrum.
Yeah, I always tried to finish unless it's like a clear tabling. Other than that, I'll either talk it out, we'll figure it out. I usually, within reason, right? So if it's not feasible to talk out the turns, just because there's so many, oh, this may happen, or then I do this kind of bullshit, we won't go that far. But yeah, I'm pretty good about at least getting as much data as possible. So the app definitely made it easier for me than scribbling it down on my little marker board thing. So I appreciate that. And then yeah, I get my metrics and can see what problem areas I have. So I've been enjoying using it.
Right. And while we're talking about the app, I definitely highly recommend it for everyone out there. I really can't imagine a reason why you wouldn't want to use it, um, except for maybe that it eats some of your clock time if you're playing on a clock. I don't know, especially if you're showing it to someone new or like you have to go through their list and everything and add their grand strats and all that stuff in it. Do you feel like that adds too much time, or have you managed your time like maybe you do it while they're deploying or something?
Yeah, exactly. That's how I manage it, just through deployment and then check in with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't had anyone really complain about my record keeping on the app. I think it keeps it pretty honest, and then you have to get the exact names of all the battle tactics. So I feel like it also helps you learn their book battle tactics a little bit better too. So all in
It's
all,
certainly better than
yeah,
it's certainly better than the going through the process of that one where you do the thing.
right,
It helps to really lock those in.
right, exactly. All right, so that was a little diversion there, but missions. So we had Power Flux, Spring the Trap, and Geomantic Pulse. So for those at home, Power Flux is the one that has 4 objectives that are either A objectives or B objectives, and whoever goes second in a battle round gets to pick which ones are activated. I actually love that mission. It's not for everyone, but I typically think it's one of the better ones. Spring the Trap is I forget what the board looks like. Maybe you can fill us in on that, Nick, but it's the one where you can technically pick up D3 units and put them down on turn 2, but I've never seen anyone actually do it. So, Nick,
Yeah,
those two things. Have you seen someone do that? And I can't remember what the territories look like on that one.
yeah. So it's the smaller squares, so 15 in from each side, and then they meet in the middle, and then you only have 3 objectives going through the center line.
Hmm.
And so it's pretty basic. But uh, have I seen anybody pick any models up? I think once, and they just kind of came back down on their side because it didn't work out the way they were thinking. So not a whole lot of impact on the game.
Yeah, the rough thing is that if you can't bring them back down on turn 1, you got to wait till 2,
Right.
which is kind of weird, especially if you want to pull someone that's important, like a wizard or a general. Then you're not getting your your extra CP for that turn or X number of other things. It's kind of a weird thing, and then it has to be within the side of the board edges, right? So that's pretty rough.
Yeah.
But okay, and then Pulse. I think we all know Pulse at this point, but 4 objectives, and then it rolls across the table starting from turn 2, and it kind of has a high variance with how many points you can get, because if you play it right, Nick's a big fan of this mission, I know. If you play it right, you can get some pretty serious point swings in those middle turns when the pulse is in the middle of the board, and then you can grab the sides to each pulse. So that's a big one. Nick, anything else to add there on the missions?
No, yeah, you were right. Pulse is probably one of my favorite ones, to be honest. I think it's all about timing on that.
Yeah. And it definitely rewards people who are playing with, like, as the team captain in the Netherlands likes to talk about, Jeffrey, people who are playing for future turns. If you're playing just in the moment, Pulse can end up kind of hitting you, catching you, like blindsiding you a bit, I think. Scoring, there was a VP victory point difference, a differential system here again. I have to say, there were some issues with how the system got run, and one of the things that was actually to my detriment was I didn't realize that we were supposed to report our VP difference, not our differential score difference. Some tournaments, I'd say most of the tournaments in the Netherlands and surrounding areas at this point still ask you to report your post conversion score. So if, like, let's say you got a 25-20 and that came out to, like, I don't know, a 16-4 or something like that, or 14-6. then you report the 14-6. You don't report the VP difference. This tournament did it the other way around, and I guess I should have read the rules pack. But that first round, I didn't give myself nearly enough credit because I basically tabled the guy and reported it as like a 18-2 or something like that, which just didn't have the same impact or whatever the point difference ended up being. But it is what it is. So let's move on to the meta. Like a lot of the tournaments I've seen at this club, or if you want to call it a club, these events, it was a mix of seasoned and newer players, and there were many new faces this time around. As far as the army distribution, we had 5 KO players, so KO was the most populous of the armies, and I played KO, so I was contributing to that problem. 4 OBR players, so Nick was contributing to that problem, and then also 4 Zinch players. 3 big WA, which is interesting to see so many of a specific War Clans faction just in and of itself. A lot of times I would have written it up as however many Auric War Clans players there were. But there was one Cruel Boys player, I believe, at this tournament. Yeah, Nick played them, actually. So that actually, if you combine them, Auric War Clans would have been up to 4. Speaking of which, recently in our team's discussion, we've been there was a vote that went up. Nick, I'm curious what you think about this, as to whether at Worlds the individual sub armies of Auric War Clan should be considered separate or together as one, or different armies that different players in the same team can play. What did you end up voting for on that one?
I voted for all-in-one. I thought it was more fun that way.
All-in-one, or each one? So, as in,
so it's only one War Clan unit, so you got to pick the War Clan you're bringing.
Interesting. I went the other way. But for Worlds, I feel that way. But on the other side of the equation, I would prefer that they either just gave them different books. Like, I don't want them to have a soup army inside of a book. You know, I'd rather there just be a Cruel Boys book and an Iron Jaws book. But yeah, it is what it is. Okay, and then Sylvaneth was there too. And then 2 times it gets Seraphon, Skaven, Slanesh, Suns, and Stormcast. 5 S's, and then 1 G. And then not present, Bone Splitters, no surprise there. Cities, also no surprise. Doc, Fire Slayers, IDK, Khorne, Slaves to Darkness. Now, it's worth pointing out this was before the battle scroll changed. Was Lookout Sir changed in the most recent battle scroll? Is that correct?
No, Lookout Sir was changed with the GHB.
Okay. Did we have any big, like, rules changes that changed with the most recent battle scroll? I'm trying to remember what wouldn't have been in play at this point.
Merciless points. Blizzard changed. You couldn't teleport it in and popped it. If you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was points changes, but I think that was the major rules change, unless I'm forgetting something.
I think they added a couple battle tactics for some armies after this. But...
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But anyway, that's
Iron Jaw's got some and some shit like that.
Yeah, Skaven, Stormcast. So I think that's so just keep in mind that wasn't in play here. All right, looking at the experience, the food is generally always been a high point of these tournaments, these events at this location. It's kind of in like a hotel, a very cozy hotel. And this time, instead of eating downstairs with a more buffet sort situation, we had a buffet kind of, or a line of food that you could stand in line for, but then we sat actually in the hotel restaurant itself, which is interesting. And the service is always great, the people coming around the tables and asking for what you want and everything. And I think for Nick and myself, one of the biggest highlights of this tournament was actually that we finally got our group of 4 buds that we play kind of more casually with together. We do regularly different kind of things together, including Thanksgiving, and we're doing a little Halloween thing this weekend. But we finally got all 4 of us together. And the last time the stars looked like they were going to align, we were going to go to a Bloodstorm event in Eindhoven, but Nick got sick, so it ended up being 3 out of 4 of us. So that was definitely a highlight, I think.
Yeah, we were definitely leading up to it. We were like, nobody go anywhere. Everybody stay inside. We're not ruining this chance. We're almost there.
Exactly. So shout out to Martin and Luke. We're really glad you guys got to come. I thought about trying to put us all 4 in here and to get a different perspective on what it's like for guys that go less often to the tournaments and what they thought. But it's been so long and we're so far behind on these reports that I just thought we should just bang it out. Yeah, those guys are great. So personal experience, Nick and I both went 2-1 from what I gather. Nick, is that correct? From I looked at the score. You didn't go 3-0 at this one, right?
Nope, I went 2-1.
Okay, so we both went 2-0, but 2-1, but you can see how big of a place difference that can be. 36 different people, but we both, even though Nick placed 6. Now I have to imagine Nick was in one of the he was in the highest percentile of 2-1ers. Let's see. I'm looking at this real quick. There was only one person that got a 2-1. It was Devin, who played higher, that placed higher than you. So you were the second best 2-1er, and then I was sitting at 12th. I do wonder where I would have sat had I reported my score correctly the first round, but live and learn. Okay, so Nick, let's take a look at your army. I assumed you were going to call this Dust and Bones again because you've been calling it Dust and Bones, kind of like you did in Feeding Time. Now, I actually copy-pasted this from your invitational list, so I can just say a couple things up front that changed. You previously had the Bone Shaper in the list, but he was your general and had Dark Acolyte. The old list, as far as I'm remember, didn't have Hoarfrost, the invitational list. You did have Catacross. You had 6 Immortus Guard, but then 6 Necropolis Stalkers. You still had the Death Riders, but then you had a unit of Mortek Guard. But the rest was pretty much the same. So do you and your grand strat changed? You had something that was in your book, but then you changed it to Spellcasting Savant. You're not getting your Triumph, but I listed it here anyway. So tell us a little bit about why you made those changes, maybe.
Yeah, so the easiest one to start with is the Stalker to Immortus Guard. I always wanted to have the 2 Immortus Guards and no Stalkers, and I just didn't have the models. So now I had them, so that was an easy swap. The swap for the grand strategy was because when we talked about it last time, that grand strategy is really easy to deny, whereas the logic with Spellcasting Savant on my general with the Immortus Guard is they've got the bodyguard rule, and at the time, I know this is incorrect, I didn't realize that the Soul Mason's chair was a mount, so I was thinking, oh, outside of 12, you won't be able to see him, but not the case. So in future iterations, you'll see that this actually swaps back to the Bone Shaper to protect from getting shot outside of range. But ultimately, that's why the change was there for the general, and then what else do I got here?
Hoarfrost.
And then yeah. So at this point, I was going back and forth between Hoarfrost and Blizzard. I was thinking realistically, I'll be casting my other spells that are a little bit more important than either situationally. So I thought I'll just give Hoarfrost, and the reason is the Soul Mason has access to the entire spell lore, so it's kind of like a free choice. And then I figured I'd give it to the Death Riders, but then in practice, this didn't really work out as much as I thought it would because they were always at a range. So also in future iterations, I get rid of that.
Okay. So you got rid of the Mortek Guard. Were you missing that kind of screen at all? Because I know those Cavallos Death Riders are really important to you getting that one battle tactic, and you're not exactly using them as a screen. Plus, you had them anyway in the list before. So you basically traded, from what I can see, your Mortek Guard, your Mortek Guard, your normal battle line dudes, for the ability or taking that Soul Mason. And was that worth it?
Yes, it was. So I didn't actually. I should have used them in certain armies as a screen, but for the bulk of the armies that you go against, you actually don't really need a screen for your Immortus Guard because they're so tanky if they're already set up with their buffs.
Sure.
I learned a valuable lesson in one of my games, a little foreshadowing, that doesn't apply for every army. So, yeah, it kind of pros and cons with that.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else you want to add about this list?
It was fun while it lasted. It's no longer valid anymore because of the point changes. So I have to kind of make some modifications to get a little bit of the spice that this one had, but it was almost very silly to watch. And this is also pre the change for bringing things back to life, I think.
Okay.
I can't remember the timing of it, but Perhaps it was. So it was a bit ridiculous on how much I was bringing these Immortus Guard back and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I do think it was pre the change, because you
Because
had
that was
you
from the Battle Scroll, yeah. So
right.
it was.
So that's a big maybe explain that for those that are listening.
Yeah, so originally the rule is to bring back an Immortus Guard, they have to have taken no wounds in the unit. And then if you want to bring one back from either Catacross or the Bone Shaper on a 3-up, a model comes back. So really insane, and there's no limit to that because it's not via the rally rules or anything. Um, so then, what the change was is now you can do that same process, but an Immortus Guard comes back with 4 wounds taken. So in order to bring another one back, you have to have enough healing capability to get rid of those 4 wounds and then roll again to bring another model back with 4 wounds taken. So they really limited your capabilities to do that. You, if you ever want to bring 2 models back, you need to have access to 4 healing capabilities, and in this army, I only have 3.
Mm. Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
changes the way that the mechanics work a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so let's move on to my list. So there's a kind of a journey that I was on with KO at this point. The previous tournament that I had played was um, at the Invitational, where I played the melee list, which was 2 frigates and some combination of Sky Wardens and engine riggers. Um, I had had good success with the melee list in Barrack Zone with the +1 to hit and wound on the charge with a lot of different matchups. But when I took it to the Invitational, I just got my ass handed to me. And it just, I decided, like, look, fine, I'll give in to the 15 Thunderers thing. Let's do that. But I didn't want to totally give up the melee thing. So, and you can even see my sarcasm in the name of the list here as half meta assault, because I didn't want to go meta. I don't like going meta, but I was trying to kind of ease my way into it. And so this has basically one melee boat that's a bit undertuned melee boat, and then I would say basically the normal setup for the Thunderers, because the normal build, if you want to do like a 1-drop thing, the guy in the Netherlands that's like really good with this list is Mitchell Stahl, and he plays a 1-drop list from Bark Urbaz with an Admiral, Chemist, Navigator, 15 Thunderers, a gun hauler, I believe, and a number of Arco. I think it's 30 Arco, if I'm not mistaken. But and maybe some engine riggers. I don't know, something like that. And so I was trying to. I felt myself over time kind of being pulled toward his list. And granted, his list isn't necessarily the meta, but it's closer to the meta than what I wanted to do. So this was, this transition, and I do find that this list is still strong, but I think I made a even better list that I used more recently. But I guess the quick stuff about this is your basic threats are the Thunderers inside the ship. You can make them anything from their base is 0 to -2 rend, but every turn, as long as they're outside the ship with the Chemist, they can be -1 to -3, and then 1 turn per game, the Admiral can bump them up yet another point to -2, -4, with something in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 shots if the whole unit's there. They've got a 4+ rally, and you're also relying on the 2 times that you can use a CP on a given boat to make it teleport and then let everyone step out. The boat has to land outside 9 of the unit that it's teleporting near, but when they step out, that restriction no longer holds. So they're stepping out wholly within 3 inches of the boat, which means your 12-inch to 18-inch weapons are all within range, largely, unless they screened you out really well. And that's also often for the new Lookout Sir rule. And then they're also getting all the buffs that they need. So it can be pretty devastating, but, the army definitely needs some amount of movement shenanigans, kind of foresight. And as I later ended up building this kind of list for, you needed maybe more freedom to get your battle tactics without having to interact with your opponent. So this list was, again, a kind of transition from the melee list, which is implicitly very dependent on interacting with your opponent, being a melee list, and then to this that's wants to do the shooting. But at the end of the day, sometimes this list, I think Nick, you had a game against Mitchell Stahl where you guys didn't actually even get in combat at the Invitational until like battle
Yeah.
round 4. And I think if you're playing KO right in a certain build, you actually don't have to get into combat or even shoot anything until kind of late in the game. So that's kind of where I was going with this. Nick, I don't know if we ever played this. I ever played this list against you. I don't think so.
You played a list against me of the KO, and you were super bummed about it.
Was it against
the KO or
was it
was
OBR
against
or
my,
was it GIS?
Yeah, and then I just said no essentially with
Yeah.
my army,
Yeah.
and then that was not super fun.
Yeah, there you go. So, but that was against OBR.
Yeah.
Okay.
You,
Alright.
I think you put everything into Catacross and ended up doing a wound.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all coming back now.
Oh, great. I love it. I love it.
It's
All right.
salty in here.
So, okay, let's move on. Let's move on. All right. So, the matchups. Wow, that image looks way worse large than I thought it would be. Sometimes finding these images online, you want to search for something that's relevant to what your actual situation was on that given day. But some of the art and the quality of the uploads is pretty pixelated. So my excuse is Jonas is probably not loving seeing that pixelated image right there. But anyway, Nick. So this is a one-dayer. You played against Cruel Boys, then Gits with Squigs and Gits with Trogs. And I played against Soulblight Avangori, then the Caradron melee build, which was piloted by Hank, who has we've mentioned a number of times on these tournament reports, and then a Beast, Quake Fray, Thunderscorn kind of list, played by one of the typical TOs of the event, but he wasn't actually TOing that day, Tice. So Tice actually listens to the channel, so shout out to Tice. Hank might, who knows? Hank might be there too. But Nick, I don't, because we've done this so far in the after the event, and because I think the shared Google Doc that had all the lists in it is no longer available. I tried to find it a while ago and I couldn't pull it up. I couldn't give any more details about. I don't even know who your opponents were, or what else was in your list. Usually, I try to list more than just one main unit that was in there, but this is what we had. So, can you fill us in on maybe go through your first game there, and we'll go back and forth as we usually do. But tell us, who was your Cool Boys opponent? Do you remember?
I don't remember his name. No, it was a new fella that I haven't played against before.
Okay.
But I remember the games quite well. I never forget a game. I'll forget the person, but
Sure.
So yeah, this Cruel Boys game was all. I think he had 21 Bolt Boys, and then two of the. He had the big slimy thing. I forget what it's called. The Swamp Boss.
Okay.
And then he had I think two of the Nasha or the other ones, the Killer Boss.
Yeah.
And some pot grots, and then the basic. Oh, and I think there was Gobby in there. I think Gobsprack was there.
Okay.
It was just a big cruel party. Yeah, I think the main takeaway from this game was, or the main moment was, we deployed. He put all his shit on a line, put him on exactly 24 inches for range, and then so looking at the board, I took the first turn and then just backed up a few inches, and went. And, I was able to score with magical dominance right away. And then, it's his turn and he can't shoot me anymore. So that was his whole thing. And then so he tried to position, in such a way, but he picked a battle tactic that caused him to have to move in other directions that didn't put him in range. So then, so he's still sitting outside of 24. And then with this one, I activated the... Yeah, okay, so he's sitting outside of 24. And then when we roll off for the next turn, I decide to give it away and I activate the middle objective. So that forces him to have to come to me, but he's still out of range. So he's not going to do any damage, but he's going to have to put himself in threat range. So after that, then I it was my turn. I charged and pretty much tabled everything. So that was a relatively quick one. I think I 20-0'd that game.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was the big one. So when we were getting feedback, I was like, yeah, if you're gonna do that, don't backline yourself 100% on 24. Maybe give yourself a little bit of buffer, and then or have a different plan that if I just back up, because even when I backed, I was like, oh, I didn't even think that was possible. I never saw that coming. I was like, yeah, that, gotta think about that. So that was that was a good game. I think a good learning experience.
Do you think the Cruel Boys list could have actually dealt with you appropriately? Let's say he never failed to get everything within range. Like, does it have the
Yeah.
tools needed to deal with you?
It could. So I can give a good save against mortal wounds with 1 unit, but if he's, nailing those 5s and 6s, yeah, he could do a spicy amount of damage. Um, and then it would really come down to me being able to roll my recursion. So if I can't get them back in time, then yeah, over time he'd be able to pull it off. I mean, that's a lot of shots, 21 Bolt Boys. So it's there. It has that potential. And then since it was what is it called? Power Flux? Yeah, we're not that close. So I had some distance to cover. So if he was even, a little bit back or something like that, then he could get a couple of rounds of shooting and maybe a priority and then pop some stuff off.
Yeah.
And then I would be in trouble.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, right now I feel like, and I think with the latest meta watch, OBR ended up being in first place.
Yeah.
I mean, OBR's just got all the tools and very few of the drawbacks, even though you are slow, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So I always am surprised to hear that an army could actually punch through something, maybe do some damage, but then thinking about winning the points too, like that's also, you got to win points on any game, even if it's fair, and then you've also got to win points against an army that isn't going anywhere. So I guess you're right about the mortal wounds, but I don't know.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, is that going to win him the game? I don't know, probably not. But it would definitely make it difficult. And I think someone a masterclass like Cruel Boys is their life could probably pull it off. I don't think it's impossible. You'd have to really nail those shots, but it could be done.
Okay.
And then I just like he's nailing them. I could roll like garbage and not get any of my saves or my ward saves, and that's that. Okay. It's possible.
Yeah.
It's in the realm of possibility.
Fair enough. So my first round was against a new opponent for me, this guy named Martin, who is really lovely. I had a great game against him. Super friendly dude. He arrived maybe almost a little late. I can't remember, but it was looking a little close there. Because the last time I played a singles event at this tournament, my first round canceled on me, and I had to play Neil, and Neil crushed me. So, I was like, oh no, is this my fate for the rest of these tournaments? But anyway, he's a Soulblight player playing an Avangori list, and I think I felt bad about this, but he had like Hold the Line as his grand strat. People didn't call it out in the reading through the lists, which was a task given to individual players to check one other player's list. Hold the Line is from like the beginning of 3rd edition. It's like have more battle line units or have battle line units living. I can't remember what it was, but and then there were things about Arcane Tome, and there were other things, and I knew that I told Neil about it when we got there, and I just didn't want to start the day off on the wrong foot being that guy. But I mean, it was also so far back, that it's like I don't even know how to deal with this. I would love to choose. Can I choose a beginning of 3rd edition battle tactic? That'd be great. Our grand strat. But anyway, we ended up having a lovely game. I literally went second on every single round, and I ended up getting to choose which objectives were activated. Got all the battle tactics. I don't remember if I tabled him, but against the Soulblight army, now granted, Avangori is probably the weakest version of Soulblight right now. It's the one that focuses on the Monster Mash kind of thing, and I don't know if he was leaning full Monster Mash either. I can't remember what he had in his list, but it was a bit of a feel bad. But I try to play as friendly as possible with, especially people that are giving a tournament a shot for the first time, or however many times he's given a tournament, but they're not regular tournament goers. And feel like I made a new friend. So, hopefully it's not too bad of a feel bad, but it was a good game. Okay, so I actually now remember who your second opponent was. It was Matthew Davies. who is
Yes, the math, the mallow, the legend.
Mathmal the legend. He's living in the Netherlands now. I don't know the full story. I haven't actually talked to him, but he played with Jeff's team for AOTC recently, and I think they took third place. And he's on the Welsh, if I'm not mistaken, Worlds team, and he's
Yes.
living here now. So he's kind of training with us a bit. I haven't seen him in a minute, but you know
Yeah,
he's
he works on offshore like oil rigs, so like out in the ocean. So he's gone for extended periods of the time, and then comes back,
oh
and
wow.
yeah,
Wow, that's I had no idea. Wow,
yeah,
interesting.
man.
But anyway,
It
for
may not
any
be it may not be oil rigs, but it's like offshore whatever shit.
sure, sure,
Maybe
um,
he's like a fisherman. He's just out there all day. I don't know.
the deadliest snatch. Um,
Exactly.
so, for anyone that doesn't know, Math Mallow is a name that pops up frequently in like Honest Wargamer Rob's coverage of tournaments, and I think he's been on Warhammer Weekly. He's like a known entity in the Warhammer AOS world. So, the fact that
Just say it. He's famous.
he's famous. So the fact that he's in our community now is pretty fun, even though I haven't gotten to meet him yet. But Nick, tell us about this game. I'm sure you felt like all kinds of feelings about getting to play the Math Mallow with a list that was evidently designed to beat your list.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. So I had spoken with one of the team members for AOTC that's partnered with Matt Mallow on this one, where he's like, "Oh yeah, we brought this specific list to go against OBR. So maybe if you guys pair up, you can let us know how it goes." I was like, "Oh yeah, great." And then I had talked with someone else, and they were like, "What are you thinking about the tournament?" I was like, "Well, I'd really like to play against like some of the more difficult opponents that I can get. That way, I can learn." And so Fate thought it would be hilarious to put both of those in the same game. So I ended up playing against him against his Squig Bounders list, and it was a really really good game. We both were kind of laughing that it just worked out that way. That this is the exact thing we wanted to test against. And so what we ended up doing was I was like, well, let's just see what happens. I didn't bother to screen my Immortus Guard. I was like, let's see if they can take the Bounders, and let's just go for it. And the answer is they cannot. So pairing it with Hoarfrost and all kinds of fun shit, there's just an obscene amount of weight of dice behind it that even with a really, really good save, it doesn't make a difference. They were able to just chunk through it. And then I didn't have enough output at that point to break the unit, and that's only it was a block of 15, and there was another block of 15 sitting right behind it, so it really just ripped through me really quick. And then the other hilarious bit was the web spinner shaman, who is just racking in +1 to cast over and over again. So I think it's like a 70 or something, really really cheap model, and it was sitting on like a +7 or +9 to cast, something absurd. And so he's just ripping off Hoarfrosts, and I think he either had Hoarfrost or Blizzard. I can't remember which one it was, and he was just throwing that around like nobody's business. So it was a very very strong list, and yeah, it was a good game in terms of just like trying to be as clean as possible. And then we also were doing like did you mean to do this, because we wanted to just play it as tight as possible and make sure that it was the best game of Warhammer we had, which was also really appreciated. Um, yeah, it was a hard way to find out that you got to screen those Immortus card.
What would you have screened them with?
I would have had to sacrifice the Capitalist Riders, and we had talked about it after the game, where I was like, "Yeah, I think in hindsight, if I put these here, this is going to change the dynamic, but I don't think you would have gone in if I did that." He's like, "No, I wouldn't have. I would have just waited." And because they just have that reach, run and charge and all kinds of fun stuff. He'd get to me eventually. So it was more about timing. So I think also on this one, just being as closed off as I was, I think terrain kind of split me in half, trying to just mush my terrain piece in there, and then the other the way that the terrain was set up on the board. It really wasn't great for me, and I was pretty much pinned down.
Now, okay, so for those that don't know, the Bounders, you said they were a unit of 15 or so. When
Yeah.
they go in, they charge. You pick one enemy unit within 1 inch, and you roll a number of dice equal to the number of models in that Bounders unit, which would be 15, let's say. And every 4 up does a mortal wound. Now the question is, Were you aware at the time that you could use your command ability to make their ward save a 5+ in the charge phase?
No, I wasn't on that one.
So you could it would have
I
literally
think
doubled the amount of wounds absorption you had if that had happened. Do you think that would have made a difference?
no, because I had reinforced constructs on them, the 4-up ward.
Ah, okay.
So it was the bulk of the damage came from the attacks.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Um, so and then how's that web spinner shaman get all the pluses to cast?
It's like it's something like if he unbinds, you add +1 for every spell that gets unbound. So like it's steamrolls, right? Because it's just +1 to unbind. I think also with that, so it's just like it just builds on itself. It's some crazy shit. I don't know exactly off the top of my head.
Maybe
But
it's an artifact or something because I didn't see it on his war scroll. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So that was the mission. That was the one where you could redeploy some stuff or reset up some stuff. Spring the trap. So in that mission, I played against our buddy Hank. He was playing the melee build. It might have been Embark Nar with Brock. I can't remember 100%, but that makes sense because then he would have gotten some charge bonuses. This time, so we're playing a mirror match. I had played against a buddy here, my buddy Denny, who was also playing a melee list. And when I played the melee list, sorry, the other way around. I played he played melee and I played the shooting list, the Thunderers list. And that time I tried to go heavy alpha on him and just wipe stuff out. And it wasn't enough because those engine riggers have -2 rend on everything they've got and just pump you full of shots. And now you're in the neighborhood and they just kill you. So I thought, okay, lesson learned. I'm not going to do that again. So I played as conservatively against Hank as I possibly could. And I do think he hit maybe 1 or 2 like big charges, but at the end of the day, even though I was flat against my side of the board, I was like screened and everything. I had some buildings in my favor. We ended up ruling on a line of sight thing. This is one of those things that happens sometimes when I don't know if people are aware, but like there's an FAQ that's bigger than the GW FAQ, like or as in it's more extensive and it's covered by the AOS Worlds team and Tom and a number of rules lawyers for AOS that all kind of collectively keep this living document open. And one of those decisions is that boats can, in fact, the things inside KO boats can, in fact, see inside overgrown terrain as long as they're in the boat. Well, Hank and I were on different pages about this, and the TO at the tournament ended up ruling for the not the way it is. In the typical AOS world scenario. And that made also a bit of a difference. But it's one of those things where I really learned that my list, because it just doesn't have screens, it has 10 Artco, but like that's not a real screen, doesn't last for very long. You can't really stop the melee build. Even though I'm very much convinced the melee build is worse in the meta, I do think ultimately, if you get the mirror match, the melee build wins 9 times out of 10. If they play it right. I just think because its main enemy, the melee build's enemy, is screens, and you're just a sitting duck waiting to happen. And a lot of KO lists are often 1-drops, so you got a 50% chance that you're going to get alphaed or not. And I think it's actually better at responding to the alpha, like counter alpha or whatever counter attack, than the regular shooty list is. So. It is what it is, live and learn. I think if I had played my current version where I've got 20 Arco, I might have been able to screen it out a bit better. But at the end of the day, I think they still could have wiped that. So, and Hank is a great player. So he ended up winning first place at that tournament that day. And he got a 28-6 on me with the victory points. So I think that comes out to... I don't know, Nick, do you remember the differential system for this tournament? Was it...
It was really skewed. Like, it was really, really high. Like, you had to be 20+ points to get a 20-0.
Well, he was 20+ points. Maybe he got the 20-0. Yeah. I can't remember. But he definitely won first place. So I was a big help there. But anyway, it's always good to play against Tank. And that's the last time I've gotten to play against him in a long time. So looking forward to some future chances to play against our bud. Okay, and round 3, You went up against Gloomspite again with Trogs. Was this Rule Crewmaster or was it someone
It
else?
was
Okay,
Kuhmeister.
cool. All right, so tell us what
Yes.
happened.
Yeah, so he had several big chunks of Trog boys, and then a very, very long line of, I think, Stabas, I think 60. Um, just running them across the board as the Gits like to do as their screens. Um, this one was a bit of a slugfest. Going back and forth with the Trogs. Interestingly enough, it was me giving a bunch of minuses to him and him giving me minuses. So like we were just kind of like looking at each other. But ultimately, kind of came down to the wire towards the end, and the game winner was really positioning, and I tied up his Trogs in such a way that they couldn't get away and get on the objective at the same point at the same time. So I denied him scoring the moving pulse and things like that. So then it tilted in my favor at the end there. But overall, a pretty good game. Yeah, we had some dicey moments, I think, with pryos and everything. But overall, yeah, it was hard fought, especially on the pulse where both of us just want to sit in the middle. So that's what we did, and we fought it out as best we could.
Nice. How many times have you played against Rule now?
This would be the second.
Okay.
So I played against him in Masters when he was playing Gits and I was playing Feck, and then now, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's one of those weird things. Rule's also training with the Worlds team right now. So when you play against, and Hank too, so when you play against someone that's also sitting on that same page with you, I feel like those games, and obviously Meth Mallow is training for Worlds. You end up getting a different kind of game than you would in other situations. Like you were talking about playing a cleaner game or playing one where gotchas really aren't allowed in a normal sense. Like we're supposed to be working towards building each other up towards actual competition. So if you could get a gotcha off in a particular game, but it wouldn't hold at Worlds, it's we try to discourage that kind of thing, especially playing against each other. It's harder to regulate that with someone that you don't play against. At the tournaments we've been playing lately, I guess we've been playing out of country, so we haven't really been seeing this. But in general, do you find that you're playing against more of our own, as in the people training for Worlds, or do you find that you're getting a mix of both? Where do you kind of sit on that?
Wait, I don't know what you mean. Like, am I playing more of
When you're
Dutch people?
well, not Dutch people, people on the training for Worlds, in general at tournaments. So like imagine. You're at a local tournament. We haven't had that many lately. Obviously, the invitational doesn't count because it's only us. But do you find that in general you're playing against the more competitive types that are training for Worlds? I don't mean necessarily recently. I mean like in just the last year or so.
Yeah, I would say that that's kind of where I've been focusing my training games with, as I try to pair up with people that are also like-minded and playing at a certain level and want to like commit at a certain level. Um, at tournaments, it's kind of a crapshoot of who you get, especially for round one. But yeah, I think overall it's been landing that way, even at the tournaments that we go to. That I've been paired up against other fellow worlds. Aspirants, is that the right word? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean is
Yeah.
at tournaments, because you end up placing higher than I do a lot of times, or at best I get to submarine and you often can't submarine. Which for
Yeah.
those at home is when you kind of have a decent game, go lower, maybe you lose one, and then you kind of come back up, and then you don't play against the cream of the crop necessarily, but then you can kind of fight your way back to a decent position. Nick, oftentimes you end up having to play against some of the best players that we have, and so I guess that's kind of also implicit in the question is if you by accident end up playing against people that you know each other, you have to keep it honest simply out of just even reputation amongst yourselves, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, so my approach with these games when I do get paired up against people that are like training for worlds or whatever is that and especially in like one day or tournaments that are inherently less competitive. This is more for me trying out a list and hopefully getting some quality games in, is I'll allow more backs, like take backs, than I typically would, because my assumption there is that, when we actually play in Worlds, this mistake, or this, like, like a dumb mistake, like you just forgot to do something, isn't going to happen. So I'd rather play against that version of the game than capitalize on, aha, I gotcha.
Exactly.
You forgot to do your heroic action. It doesn't matter to me, because that doesn't help me get better. So in those cases, where I usually draw a line is like game defining back moves. Like if you make a decision and you kind of roll on it and they go, wait a second, let me think about it, and then take it all back and like try and read. That's where we're like, okay, I think we got to stick with something, right? Or else why play if you're just no, never mind. But for things like, oh, I forgot to do this, do you mind if I forgot to do, an ability that you would have known? Like a good example is like the War Chainer. You're always going to do the destruction, the extra damage. Like, yeah, duh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a difference to me.
Sure.
Like that kind of stuff. Let's make sure that you got all that.
Right. Okay. That's where I'm going with that. Okay, and my last opponent was Tice. What I mentioned before, Tice is often one of the TOs at these events, and I think, if I remember correctly, he had played not that many games of AOS at that point. So it was, I guess with my background and him kind of just getting started doing it, though he plays other games for sure. I had some kind of built-in, I guess, advantage or assumed advantage here with odds. But, there was a moment playing against this beast list that was Quake Phrase, I believe, that had Cygors and Gorgons, which were priests or something like that. I guess I forget exactly what the ruling, maybe it's just Cygors. And then he had, like, the Thunderscorn stuff. I mean, it was one of these kind of lists that... how do you say that? Like it's more Mimi is not the right word, but a bit more leaning into a thing that maybe isn't as optimal as it could be. I don't think he actually kept anything off the table. I feel like he put most things down. He had a big block of the Dragon Ogres and then a Shaggoth and probably a Great Bray Shaman. Or no, it was he might have also had the Beast Lord in there. In any case, there was a moment, it was on Geomantic Pulse, where I really thought he was going to kick the shit out of me with his like return of attacks, but it just didn't play out that way, and I ended up rolling with the Pulse, got my battle tactics, and then ended up denying his ability to control the objectives from about turn 3 on, which made for a really big point swing. But it was really nice playing against the guy, and for me, getting to play against the guys who are running these things too is just such a cool thing when you know that they're going to be also wanting to check out how the tournament. He'd been listening to some of our tournament reports before, and he even asked me not too long ago, well, actually probably a bit long ago now that it's taken so long to come out, when this thing was coming out. So that's awesome. And so thanks to Tice and Neil for always making these tournaments, for me, a fun time and getting to try some stuff out. As far as results are concerned, Nick, as we mentioned before, you took 6th place and I took 12th. I don't know how the algorithm works, but I think if I had reported my score better, I would have been just below you. Do you remember how big your point swings were for the games you won? Were they big?
I know the first one was like a 20-0. The second one was not a massive loss.
Yeah.
But it wasn't great. And then the third one was a decent, like a 16-4, 15-5, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I ended up getting something that was like an 18-2 in 2 of my games, or maybe a 20-0 for the last one. So, but then I lost pretty hard in the middle. So I probably would have been below you. But in any case, good job on getting 6th place at this one.
Thank you.
First place was Hank, as we've mentioned. Second place was a guy I don't know, named Martin, I believe. Martin S. I don't know him. And then we had Lex. Do you remember what Lex was playing at this tournament?
Nurgle.
Oh, cool. taking third
Yeah.
place with a Nurgle list. Pretty neat. And one of our buddies, Devin, he was also at this tournament. He might have been playing Zeech. I can't remember exactly what he was playing, but he took fifth place right in front of you. And then Math Mello took seventh place underneath you. I don't know how that ended up working out, but you actually in spiritually beat Math Mallow, even though he did beat you in game. So
Sure, whatever we tell ourselves.
There you go. Now, for everyone at home, a one-day tournament with 3 games is harder. It's really swingy, and a lot of times it doesn't weed out the real differences between the top tables, because a lot of times the top 3 players never ended up playing against each other. So that's kind of one of those things. That's part of that. Whatever we tell ourselves, I think Nick is maybe hinting at here. But future goals, Nick. What if, like, without spoiling what the next few tournament reports are going to look like? What was your thought process leading into the next tournament you were going into after this one, which I guess for you would have been the teams tournament?
Yeah, so it was waiting for the battle scroll to see how that shakes out, because I didn't know at the time what was going to happen, so I had to wait and kind of restructure my list based on any points changes or the mechanics changes. So I was sitting pretty, waiting for that. Where I maybe just if I jump to the present, where I'm at right now is I've more or less kind of just parked OBR for now because they're a little bit on cruise control for me, and now trying to pick up another army that I can have in my arsenal for when we start talking about list compositions when we're practicing for Worlds.
Sure.
So I wanted to have another, potential to be like, oh, well, I can also play this army and feck if that ever comes out. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Nice. Yeah, and after this tournament, I was, let's see, for the AOTC, I still played this list, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, I did okay at AOTC, but then it ended up inspiring me to change my list a bit. And then for those that have seen in the Discord, I've switched to Sylvaneth recently, as per Nick's recommendation. So that's another spoiler for what's coming. But anyway. Closing thoughts. Nick, anything else you want to add to the discussion of this tournament in particular? Hanging out with the guys?
Thanks to the Rotterdam White Scars, guys. So thanks very much. It was a great tournament. Had a good time. So looking forward to the next one.
Cool. And yeah, I can echo those thoughts. I always like going to the alternative tournaments. I'm not going to be able to make it to the Bloodstorm coming up soon in Eindhoven, but we've also got plenty of other things coming down the pipeline in the near future. So always love our tournaments here in the Netherlands. All right, and last slide here. Thanks again for everyone with their patience on these videos, and to keep up the following the channel with the likes, sharing, and subscribing and all that. Keep up with us in the Discord, and until next time, Ryan out.